I'm Jacob Tender.
I'm Mike Amate.
And welcome back to Bantha Fodder. Bantha Fodder is a Star Wars show about everything and nothing in particular. In each episode, we dissect one concept, character, or narrative in our own way. We may not agree on everything.
Or anything.
But we both love this crazy space opera for all that it has been, is, and could be.
This week, we're talking about a singular phrase and how it affects the entirety of the saga. It's been said in every episodic movie by an array of characters, both Force-sensitive and not. The line in question is one that can be looked at through a lens filtered by a meme-based pop culture and a universe-based context that affects the characters we love so much. The line?
I have a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
I have a very bad feeling about this.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I have a really bad feeling about this. I got a bad feeling about this.
We'll dig into that here in a moment, but first, some follow-up.
Last episode, we talked about traditions being broken with the abandonment of the crawl in Rogue One and the unconventional continuity of Episode 8. Go back and listen to that if you haven't yet. It was a good episode. But now we've dug up another ancient article that poses a new question surrounding the sanctity of an original work. That is the possibility of Peter Cushing returning as Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One. The fictional timeline checks out. Rogue One is pre-Episode 4. But Peter Cushing died in 94, so he does not check out, or he did check out, and now, from this planet. Jake, why would anybody say that Peter Cushing could be in Rogue One?
Well, in August of last year, so 2015, a story emerged that Tarkin could be returning to Rogue One with Peter Cushing, or at the very least his likeness, playing the part. Nothing since has either confirmed or denied that possibility, but is it out of the question? In Revenge of the Sith, Tarkin was played by Wayne Pygram, who donned prosthetics to accentuate the sunken jawline of Cushing. This was like a super small role, had no lines. Tarkin basically just kind of walks up to Palpatine and Vader at the end of the movie as they look upon the shell of the Death Star. So, Mike, I'm asking you, how could they make Tarkin fit in Rogue One, and how would he be portrayed?
Well, seeing as I know next to nothing about the Rogue One narrative based on my own ignorance. Tarkin, he'll just fit into it.
I think technically he could. I think, it makes sense. Obviously, he's going to be important throughout that entire thing. They kind of set that up with the end of Revenge of the Sith, knowing that he was important enough to be hanging out with Palpatine and Vader, watching the construction of the Death Star, and then knowing...
But we see him a lot.
Place.
We see him a lot in, maybe not a lot. We see him. We get a really solid glimpse of him in the rescue mission in Clone Wars, the animated series.
Yeah, remind me about that.
It was the third season, 20th episode. Citadel Rescue was the name of it. I don't know that off the top of my head. I absolutely looked that up. But the premise of that episode is that there's some intel that needs to be delivered back to the good guys, and half of the intel lies with Ahsoka, and half of the intel lies with Tarkin, and they have to go rescue Tarkin. And Tarkin is just being himself the whole time. He's technically a good guy in this context. He's on the same side as Anakin and Obi-Wan, but he's he's really doubtful that the Jedi can hold things together, and that's kind of the premise. They're just trying to rescue him, and you kind of see Anakin opening up and trying to work with Tarkin throughout the whole thing, from what I remember. But basically, he's just it's kind of Tarkin doubting the Jedi's abilities, which makes sense. And the whole premise of the half intel being with Ahsoka and half of it being with Tarkin is that Ahsoka will only give the intel to the Jedi Council, and Tarkin will only deliver it to the Chancellor, who is Palpatine. So
right.
It makes sense then that in Revenge of the Sith we see Tarkin kind of just walking up to Vader and Palpatine, because those are the kind of two people he only trusted.
I forgot about that episode, actually. It's been a while since I watched the Clone Wars, but I have been watching Rebels, and he's been involved there quite a bit as well. He actually appeared in, I think, 4 episodes, 3 of them in Season 1, and then Season 3, he essentially introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn to the canon story, which is kind of neat.
Oh, yeah,
so
wow.
Yeah, I didn't know. I don't know if you know that because you're not watching Rebels, right? At least you're not caught up.
No, I'm still plowing through Clone Wars very slowly.
Yeah. Well, eventually you'll get there, and it's actually pretty great. I think Rebels has really improved over the past few seasons, but they have included Tarkin in quite a few episodes, and some major plot points. Like he's very involved in trying to crush the Rebel threat as it's just starting to begin. With the cast of the Rebels TV show. So obviously, he's a well-loved character, and Cushing did a really great job in, kind of lending his sinister abilities to the film. And, in contrast to Alec Guinness, who was in episode 4, but really didn't like his experience on the film, Peter Cushing, who was just as prolific at the time, if not more, really actually enjoyed it. He thought it was great and that he was able to, show his ability and that he was getting fans in a much younger fan base than the ones that loved him so much for his classic monster films. So it's kind of interesting. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen with this. The question is whether or not he will appear in Rogue One. And there is no news as to whether or not that's going to happen. But Anthony Bresnikan at Entertainment Weekly, who wrote this article in 2015, he posited a good concept, a good idea for how to make this work. He wrote, "If Tarkin is glimpsed only as a hologram or in a brief cameo, then the gimmick of a full digital recreation might be an entertaining surprise. But if he's a major character or even a supporting player with a few key scenes, I have my fingers crossed that the filmmakers don't go to the Tron legacy route, trying to digitally simulate a human character the way that 2010 film did with Jeff Bridges." So I think that's a good point. I think if they were to try to Tupac the thing and make a full Tarkin walking around and basically a CGI version of Peter Cushing, I don't think that'd be great. And I think even with the prosthetic version of Tarkin that was played by Wayne Bygram in Revenge of the Sith, I think that would be bad too. I think it was relatively convincing from a distance, especially in that scene where shadows kind of covered up all the seams of the prosthetics and all that. Mm-hmm. That worked, but if you look at just the promotional shots that they took, the headshots of him within the makeup, it's kind of uncanny valley because it does look like him. You get the effect, but it's not because it's just that soulless part of him, which is just rubber and plastic. So I think I agree with this, and I think personally I would like to see it. I think it would be kind of a nice homage, and it would definitely tie things together well if they were able to take what they could from the original movie, which wasn't much. Obviously they didn't do 3D scans of actors back then. And there wasn't a whole lot of footage to go off of with Tarkin, but I think if they were able to create a hologram of sorts, one of the classic blue holograms talking to, whatever character is actually on screen at the time, that could be kind of interesting, and I would like that. But what do you think?
Did you see Fast and the Furious 7?
I've seen none of those movies.
That's a shame, man. They're great flicks. But, if they can make an entire movie with Paul Walker... that movie was... I don't know the actual statistics, but I feel like they had only had 20% or something of Paul Walker's scenes shot before he died. And the rest of it was done with CG, and it was done with his a body double, which was, I believe, his brother, who looks remarkably like him. So, but it was they really didn't have a lot of Paul Walker done in that. And I feel like if they can get if somebody had told me, if I had gone into seeing that Fast and Furious movie without knowing anything about Paul Walker not being alive, then I would not have questioned it at all. I don't remember one moment in that movie where I was like, that looks kind of weird. To say, because the Tron Legacy comparison, I remember it, but I don't think that's I think we're past that at this point. That was just bad in general. But this, Paul Walker was that was a pretty flawless, CG character essentially, even though he wasn't CG.
But with Paul Walker, obviously there's a lot more high definition footage for them to use as a source. I think one of the weird things with this story is that with Tarkin, especially in the context, or with Cushing, rather, in the context of Star Wars, there was not much footage to be had. He didn't have very many scenes to begin with, and I don't believe there were many takes. So if there is any of that extra unused footage around, there's not much of it. So to show enough of him from enough angles to accurately create something that they could use as basically as a model for a hologram would be relatively difficult, I think. But apparently the technology is there.
I'm sure it is. And here's my deal is that I just, once again, I don't care. Like literally just cast any human being that is like kind of gaunt looking and very chilling to look at. I'm fine with it, you know? Like I don't need prosthetics on anybody's face to be like, oh, his cheekbones were not at the exact level that they were in episode 4. I'm out. See ya.
Yeah.
Like just anybody could play it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a case can be made for that because I mean, look at Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ewan McGregor. You know, Ewan McGregor, for me at least, is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I think that's true for everybody. He's not Alec Guinness. He's not the guy who originally played the character, but he did a great job in emulating what it was about Obi-Wan that was special. You know, specifically the way that he spoke, like the eloquence in which he spoke. But he's completely different. They didn't make him look like Obi-Wan Kenobi as you see him.
Well, especially if you're thinking about episode 1. I mean, I remember being 10 years old and seeing the trailer for episode 1 and seeing Qui-Gon and being like, oh, because I knew Obi-Wan was going to be in it. Like, Obi-Wan's a character in episode 1. And I was like, oh, so that, because I had no idea who Qui-Gon was. And I was like, oh, that's Obi-Wan with long hair and a beard. I thought it made perfect sense. And then I get into it and I find out that, like, there's this little, like, I mean, what would you call Obi-Wan's hair in episode 1? Like a crew cut almost? Like a grown out crew cut?
It's like the Jedi cut.
Like a buzz cut.
That's what I ask for
it's
when
like
I go
a
to the
buzz
barber.
cut like a month later. That's kind of with a rat tail on the side. And to come to find out that's Obi-Wan, I'm like, this is weird.
But he made it work, and I think Ewan McGregor has done one of the better portrayals of the character in a long time. You know, notwithstanding the guy who does the voice acting for the animated shows, I think he does a great job too. But I think that if they were to get somebody that looked relatively like a younger Tarkin, that could work. And of course, that's been messed up a little bit because they had the guy that did the prosthetics in The Revenge of the Sith. But I don't know. I think they can make that work. But I wonder if this is actually going to be a thing. Again, this story is like over a year old. They've done reshoots since then. Like, I think it's highly possible that Tarkin will not be in this film at all. I think that would be difficult to sell, considering that he is so involved with the creation of the Death Star, and that this is a story about the Death Star being finished and stealing the plans to destroy it. Like, you'd think that he would be involved, but I don't know. On Reddit, there is a thread with a clip from the sizzle reel that they played at Celebration, and somebody put a little arrow in there pointing out somebody on the deck that kind of looks like Tarkin. You know, obviously this is just one of those things like, is this Porkins? Like, is this Tarkin? It's hard to say. So it's possible that he will be in the film. There's nothing to say necessarily that he will. Funko did just release a Tarkin-based pop figure. It's not within the Rogue One packaging, like a lot of the new characters. It's in one of the new, like, standard Star Wars packaging without any, like, specific movie tie-in. But who knows? I personally, I wouldn't be against it. I think that they just have to do it tastefully. And I think I agree with Anthony at Entertainment Weekly. And if they were to do a hologram, I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, it almost seems like a shoehorn, though, to do a hologram. I would rather kind of see... You saw Avengers, the first one. I know you didn't see Avengers the second one. We talked about that last episode. I would appreciate Tarkin, not in a hologram sense, but almost in a sense of in Avengers when you had that like weird shadow government people kind of popping in like a couple times with Nick Fury during the course of the movie. I would appreciate him as like a fixture in the movie, but like something we keep coming back to remotely, even if that like I don't need a Tarkin reference walking up to Vader and Palpatine or something on a bridge. I don't need that.
Yeah, they could probably get away with it with mentions only. You know, just like officers on the deck vaguely mentioning Tarkin, who is overseeing something else, and like, you know, it's entirely possible that the threat.
That's what I don't want, though.
What you don't want just the mentions?
No, I don't want to shoehorn Tarkin in. I would prefer he is like a substantial character in the story, but I don't think he is based on kind of the promotional materials that have kind of floated into my periphery.
Yeah, I think they have enough bad guys in this movie that they don't necessarily need Tarkin.
I would take Thrawn, though. I would take a little Thrawn. Okay, here's the thing. I don't want Tarkin shoehorned in, but I would absolutely take a Thrawn being shoehorned. Oh, God. What a hypocrite.
I don't think it's going to happen, boss. I think they've got that covered with Ben Mendelsohn's character, but that's what Rebels is for, so you got to catch up.
Yeah, I do have to catch up.
The phrase itself,
I got a bad feeling about this,
has been said many times in the Lucasverse. Han, Luke, Leia, Obi-Wan, Anakin, C-3PO, and even Indiana Jones have said the line, making it a cute fan service referential moment in a question of meta importance. How does the line fit within the context of the scene in which it was said? This is what we're talking about tonight. So, Mike, when you asked me about this, you basically just texted me and you were like, you know, what do you think about the phrase, I have a bad feeling about this? And you gave me absolutely no context. And personally, like, I drew my own conclusions because the one that sticks out for me, at least, is when Han Solo says it. And that made me think about, like, oh, like, is there deeper meaning to that? Like, is that supposed to mean that he has, like, a, quote, feeling about this? So it's an interesting topic. I'm looking at a list of the times that this is said. There's a StarWars.wikia.com article on it, and it looks like it's said 9 times in the movie itself, and it's said a bunch in like the extra stuff, so like the books and the TV shows and all that. But it's said 9 times. Yeah,
I mean the reference goes way far outside the Star Wars universe. Even I mean, we'll toss this in the show notes, but there's this Wikipedia article that we have. Kind of lists almost all mentions known in popular culture of this thing, and it goes so far. I mean, you mentioned Indiana Jones before.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Yeah, of course, that's within like the realm of George Lucas, but
sure, exactly. You know. But that's the in joke right there, you know.
I think it's cool. Like, I think as far as like the phrase itself goes, it's fun. You know, it's like that little like nod to the people that pick up on it, you know. Even while I'm watching it, I don't personally think about it. When they say the line, like, I don't think about it. It's a great line, but I don't think, oh, this has been said in every movie that's kind of like cornball and cheesy. Like, it usually fits within the context of the scene, but I think it is sort of like a fan service moment for the people that get it, you know, the people that like pay attention to every single line uttered in the movie and notice that this is something that's reoccurring in every single film.
For sure.
It's in every single film. And the only person that I think in the movie says it twice is Obi-Wan, but that makes sense because he's hanging out with Anakin and that guy's crazy.
Mm-hmm. That dude is nuts.
So what do you think about it, you know, within the context of the movie? Does it make sense in most of it, or do you think it's just like cheesy?
Well, it makes sense to me in a couple different ways. So I think you can look at it one way, which is the sociological way. So when something is cool to you or I, we use the word like, that's cool. Or like lately people are going like, that's dope. That's something that's getting said around me a lot lately by various people. Really any joke that we get, any like, I guess meme. So in the context of the films, yeah, like saying, I got a bad feeling about this, that could be like a trendy saying in the galaxy, you know, amongst the people that are saying it. I mean, granted, it goes on for a long period of time, and it doesn't seem like a specific slang term or anything like that. So, but it just could be something in the context of their culture that they say when they feel something is going. Because, I mean, I don't say I've got a bad feeling about this that frequently, you know?
Even C-3PO says it, you know, whether or not it's in his programming, like he is aware that this is sort of like a
colloquialism.
Yes, that word. It's sort of like something within, you know, whether it be the culture or like, you know, that's kind of hard to say with C-3PO because he's kind of aware of all languages and cultures. But you know what I mean? Like, it's something that even the droids are picking up on. So maybe it is something that's just like said in the galaxy. Maybe it's just like a right on or cool beans.
Right. And then there's another way to kind of interpret that whole thing. You know, if we're to look aside and just be like, no, that is not just like a turn of phrase in the galaxy that is used by a lot of people when something is about to potentially go wrong or is likely to go wrong. I mean, that's obviously the most logical explanation for it and the best way to look at it in the context of like being in that universe. But you could also kind of peer at it in a different way, which I thought was interesting, which is that these people are actually getting a bad feeling about this and kind of a nudge. Because in this universe, in the universe of Star Wars, there's unquestionably, whether, you know, Han Solo or any of the Imperial officers in Episode 4 doubt that it exists, the Force exists in the context of this universe. So there is a force that kind of nudges you, or that can be influencing nature, that you can influence, whatever. So that's another way to look at this turn of phrase, is that, you know, these people are saying this because they're actually feeling something in the pit of their stomach that is more than just like, it's maybe that, like in this universe, like a gut feeling is the Force, you know, and that's what they're experiencing. So
are you saying that these beings that are saying this have like a connection to the Force, or that the Force itself is swaying these people? Like it's acting upon them.
Here's where we kind of branch out a little bit, and like this is where the debate can kind of get weird, because some people, who has a connection to the Force? You know, I think it's argued at certain points in various pieces of literature that the Force is connected to everything, like every living being, which brings the droid part into question, I guess. So we'll ignore that for the time being.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's possible to say that everybody's kind of connected to the Force and everybody's kind of getting a little nudge here and there.
Well, I guess they're really at the heart of it. I mean, I believe, as far as I've read, as far as I've seen within the movies, and I think I've read enough at this point to maybe get an understanding of how the canonized Force works. Like, I think the Force flows through all things. All living things have the Force flowing through it. And then there are those few that have the ability to use the Force, bend the Force to their will, in a way, you know? So I think the real question here is whether or not the Force itself, that flows through all things and can be controlled by some, is able to act upon itself and is actually able to consciously influence things on its own without using Force wielders to do its bidding. You know what I mean? Like it's actually with those that are not able to use the Force in their own way, does the Force act upon them in a way that makes them actually make change? Do you follow?
I follow, and I'm kind of jumping to something else here. What about the virgin birth in that sense? Does that support your theory?
You talking about Shmi?
I'm talking about Shmi.
Shmi. Well, we keep coming back to this, and I still think that's like one of the trickiest topics in the Star Wars universe as far as like the Force goes, because you would think that if the virgin birth of Anakin Skywalker actually occurred, which personally I don't.
You think Shmi's a liar?
No, I don't know.
She could be. I'm not accusing you.
I don't want to call her a liar.
I'm not accusing you. I think it'd be totally. It would be weird and to infer that Shmi is lying to Qui-Gon. I don't know why she would, but like.
Well, it's like I said in a prior episode. She's like the strong single mother that doesn't want to give any credit to the deadbeat father who jumped out.
Right.
So I mean that's just my personal feeling. But if
to lie to a Jedi, though, you know, to lying to Qui-Gon, yeah,
screw it. I'm sure it's passable. He's not going to question it.
Right.
Like he's I'm not going to mess with this. So I mean, if for instance she actually did, you know, have a virgin birth for Anakin Skywalker, if Anakin was born without a true biological father and he was born of the Force itself, that's a huge question. That's like, okay, is the Force itself impregnating women on Tatooine? Or did she somehow will that to happen? Is she Force sensitive herself? And that's never hinted at. That's never revealed in any sort of way. That's just, you know, that's positing a theory. But what do you think? Like, I mean, you bring it up. Why do you think about the virgin birth when you think about that question?
Remind me. I think it's been Attack of the Clones is the movie that it's been the longest since I've seen. when Anakin goes back to rescue Shmi, is he getting visions, or is she reaching out to him at all? Kind of the way that like he sees the future in Episode 3,
or kind of like when like the siblings are calling out to each other through the Force, and
right
when Luke is hanging from Bespin.
I don't remember why Anakin has to go back to Tatooine to rescue Shmi. Is he? I feel like he's having visions or dreams or something of Shmi. I can't remember. I'm a great Star Wars fan.
I think he senses that there are issues on Tatooine and that he needs to go find his mother because she's in trouble.
Okay. So yeah, I brought up the virgin birth because that is an example of someone who's not typically Force sensitive being influenced by the Force on its own power. You know, there was that rumor, or not rumor, like the hypothesis that like Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis or something kind of like put out their dark vibes into the universe, and that's what got Shmi pregnant. I love that theory. That's like one of my favorite theories.
Really?
I think it's been
just the bad vibes.
Yeah, well, like I just imagine them like going out on their roof and being like, "All right," and just like weird Force.
Yeah, but that also implies that Anakin was inherently evil to start. Like, he was born of evil.
Right, and I think that's been debunked recently. I read something about that not being a thing that happened. But I thought it was really funny to hear about that. But I don't even know how I got into that sidetrack. But
I don't either.
Yeah, but it's just I was saying like, oh yeah, that's another corollary to the virgin birth. But no, I just I like the idea of the Force acting on people. How it relates to this whole got a bad feeling about this is that, you know, in this universe, hunches or ominous feelings is the work of the Force.
Okay. So, Mike, I have a question for you. Han Solo, slimy, double-crossing, no-good swindler and skilled pilot who frees a princess from prison and captures her heart, or secretly a Force-sensitive freighter jock?
Well, then you got to look at what is Force-sensitive, you know?
Okay.
Because, like, I think of Force-sensitive as young children who exhibit potential to be Jedi. That's kind of what I think of as Force-sensitive. Or like extremely, like excessively Force sensitive, maybe. Like, because in my theory, you know, where the Force is acting through everybody all the time, then I think everybody's kind of Force sensitive. It just to what degree, you know? Like Luke,
right? Very
Force sensitive, you know, use the Force to take down the Death Star. Han Solo, you know, definitely a skilled pilot, although. Do we see? Oh, I guess the asteroid chase.
Yeah, I mean the chances of navigating that asteroid field.
Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
I mean, like, yeah. So I guess we see some really cool stuff going on there, but I don't know if you could consider like him the same Force sensitivity as Luke. You know, but you could argue that the Force is acting through him in the same way that it got Shmi Skywalker pregnant, in the sense, think about the Death Star trench run, when Han came back and saved Luke's ass. You know, like, Luke never would have made that shot if Vader had locked onto him and taken him out, you know. And the only reason Vader didn't get a chance to do that is because Han came back. So, you know, and this is, I had a really heated argument with a coworker about this, you know, this passion's flared. You can't. His argument was that you can't blame everything on the Force, or you can't pin everything on the Force. You know, like there has to be free will somewhere in here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a huge topic. I mean, that might be bigger in this episode. You know, just the idea of free will as opposed to the Force, and you know, of course, that correlates to, you know, real life. But that's a huge thing, and I think that's a great point to bring up. Like, is Han able to just do these things because like he's trained, he's done this his entire life, or is there intervention? I mean, I think that's kind of like the symptom, like this whole idea of bad feelings about this. That's kind of that's like a little trace evidence of the Force being this all powerful, predetermined fate kind of organism that kind of guides things to go. Like could Han have kept going? You know,
or did like his heart change? Did something change in his heart? The same way like something changed in Anakin's heart or whatever, when he became Darth Vader, and like the dark side of the Force kind of overtook him, or I don't know. It's I mean, what's the internet saying about Han Solo being Force sensitive?
The internet says many things.
Right.
Crack.com has an entire article called 12 Times Han Solo Used the Force Without Knowing It.
Oh, really? What are some of those examples?
Well, the first example is one I actually hate. It's Han is not trained in the ways of the Force like his father before him. So when trying to get people to do what he wants, he resorts to charm. Of course, that's a personality trait of Han Solo that we all know and love. But what they show here is an animated GIF of the scene where he's talking to Jabba on Tatooine before he actually hauls Luke and Obi-Wan off the planet. Okay. But it's the scene where they put in the CGI Jabba. And it the GIF kind of makes, I never looked at it this closely, but it kind of looks like instead of just emphatically waving his arm like an Italian man, he is rubbing Jabba on, like, I guess his throat. It looks terrible. It's awful. I actually hate that.
It upsets me.
Entire thing. It's terrible. But, they're just showing examples like that, just calling things luck, like saying when Luke tries to block the laser with his visor down in A New Hope. He calls it luck. Yet in Return of the Jedi, when Han shoots the Sarlacc's tentacle, except that he's upside down and he's blind.
Yeah.
Like, that's not luck. Like, it's things like that. Like, of course, like flying through an asteroid field or, there are countless examples to say that like Han Solo is Force sensitive. Obviously, he's a very skilled pilot. He can land the Millennium Falcon without going off a cliff, and then he can, like take out a power supply, and like the scanners don't work on Hoth, but he's still able to find Luke pretty much immediately. Like, how much of that is like supposed to just progress the plot, and how much of that is actually Han, and then within that, like how much of it is Han's ability, or how much of it is the Force? And like when you're talking about the bad feelings that people are feeling within this universe, like it's tough to say what's what. In the new Ahsoka novel, which I'm finishing up now, there is a young character in the book who is Force sensitive, and of course this novel takes place after the Order 66, so all the Jedi have been eliminated, so there are no Jedi to seek out these young Force wielding children and to actually train them. But Ahsoka happens upon one, and she's determined to keep her safe. It's not the main plot point of the book, but it's just like one of those moments where it's like, okay, so Order 66 happened, the Jedi are pretty much gone at this point, but there are still Force sensitive kids out there. So you kind of question, like, okay, is it possible that Han Solo had some of this ability and just wasn't trained? Because it's possible that over time, even though he's not trained, like he can still use these abilities, just not at his will. It's just something that he has still yet to learn to control, and especially in his 30s or 40s, however old he is when A New Hope takes place, he's not willing to even consider the possibility that the things that he's experienced throughout his life, all the luck and the near escapes, are due to a possible Force intervention. He might just like expel that as an explanation for the things that have been. So I think it's hard to say whether or not it's actually possible, but it's a fun question to think about, and of course, since he has a son who is apparently a very powerful Force user, there's reason to believe that maybe he had that ability, or the Force acted upon itself to bring together Han Solo and Princess Leia, or General Leia Organa, to have that child to restore balance. There's a question for you.
That's something I don't think we can touch upon that yet. But going back to that crack article, that's bad. That's a bad article.
It is a bad article.
Just to be
it's
clear,
not even an article. They just made like a bunch of images.
It's a listicle. The listicle.
Yeah.
But to be clear, in that listicle, number 9, he has a bad feeling about this. That's reference number 9 in there, talking about how he says that line 3 times, and so that makes him the most avid user of that phrase. I think that listicle is as bad is like a step up from the stupid Jar Jar Binks stuff, but I think it's like equally down there as far as things made up. You know, like Han moving his hand a certain way is not a Jedi mind trick. What are some of the other stupid ones?
I mean, this is basically a list of all the cool things that Han Solo does, and then them just saying that it's because he uses the Force.
Well, most of these things that they're pointing out in the listicle are just things that he does in the movie that are like totally random and happenstance. Like the odds of Han finding Luke on Hoth.
R2 says the chances of survival are 725 to 1.
That, I would say, is a bigger argument for the Force in general. I don't think that has anything to do with Han specifically. I think that's like... I would jump on board of the Force, you know, like influencing Han again, like they brought him back to the Death Star or something like that. You know, like it's a weird line that I'm writing, and I don't even think I'm being consistent enough in it, but I feel like I'm more comfortable with saying that the Force acts as a whole onto individuals and pushes the pieces in the right way. And I don't even know if I believe that entirely, rather than saying Han is Force sensitive and he's doing these things, you know, without even intending to, because I think it's just way easier and more clear cut to just be like, no, Luke is he's using the Force. He's calling his lightsaber from the snow. He is, you know, lifting 3PO up in a chair around the Ewok village. You know, like that is someone who's using the Force knowingly, and I'm cool with that. But I'm also cool with saying that the Force has like moves people like chess pieces in certain elements, in a certain respect.
I'd agree with that. About 4 years ago, a Reddit user named Suma Joe wrote an article on the fan theory subreddit, and this is his conclusionary statement about the topic of Han Solo being a Force wielder. So he says that Han attributes a lot of this to luck, and he does have an incredible amount of luck. But as Obi-Wan tells us, there's no such thing as luck. And Han has an unconscious connection to the Force that allows him to do all of the feats he shows in the films. Obi-Wan could sense this, which is why he hired Han to take them to Alderaan. And Vader can sense it as well, which is why he knew that Han would survive the freezing process. Han perhaps doesn't have a strong enough connection to become a Jedi, and he certainly lacks the discipline, but it's definitely strong enough to give him a considerable edge over anyone he comes up against. And I think that's fair. I don't think that he needs to have full control over it. Obviously, he doesn't have the training or, like this user says, the discipline. But I think it's possible that whether it's the Force acting upon him or the Force flowing through him, I think it's entirely possible to say that the Force has had a hand in Han Solo being able to survive all of the things that he has over the years. Would you agree with that?
In the broadest sense, that carbonite freezing, I don't think anybody can infer that Vader
That's
knew.
kind of silly.
No one knew he could survive. Vader doesn't. Vader's like, yes, he is going to survive. He didn't care. It was just a test to make sure that it worked on a human being.
Right, because he wanted to use it on Luke.
He wanted Luke alive to present to the
Right.
Emperor. So that was his test to see if it would make some alive. If Han had died, he wouldn't have given a crap. You know, it just would have been dead Han Solo. Maybe we got to figure something else out to make some tweaks before Luke jumps into this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that still kind of contradicts what I think. I think Han is like, I don't know. I think Han is more like what I actually think Jar Jar Binks is. You know, Han is cunning and skilled in a lot of things, and courageous. You know, but Jar Jar Binks is like pulling tanks around and falling and like dropping bombs or whatever, those little like light grenades or whatever they were. Han is kind of like that, but better and more deliberate in his moves. But like,
you mean that he's lucky?
Yeah, which again goes into my idea of the Force using him like a chess piece rather than him being like having like it's less of an unconscious connection and more of like a guiding arm for him, which I guess is unconscious. But the way this person on Reddit's describing it is more like a subconscious thing. Whereas, like, I don't think I don't know. It's a stupid argument. This is bad.
That's not bad. It's not bad.
It's not bad. I'm just having a hard time parsing it out and figuring out like what I actually believe in this matter. And I think I have an idea, but
I think whenever you come to a certain idea about how something is, or you come to a realization that that proves one thing. I think it's just as easy to immediately realize something else that has happened within the Star Wars universe that directly contradicts that. And I think that's an issue that we're going to run across as far as this podcast or any discussions about the saga goes on, is that it's meant to be left ambiguous. At the end of the day, it's Star Wars and it's fun to talk about, and that's why. And I think this is a reoccurring theme of the show, and I think it's the one truth that we can find within the context of this storyline, is that everything is intentionally left ambiguous, and that's why it's entertaining. And I think that's why, the Force is such an amazing tool for this saga's continuance. Like, I don't think that Star Wars would be as popular if not for the cop-out and the plot progressor and the questions that come with the idea of the Force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I throw in one little wrench into this whole process that we're churning about here?
Yeah.
Shattered Empire, the comic series that takes place before the events of Episode 7. You read it?
I have read it. It was a good comic, actually. It was a short series, but I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember part 5 of that short series?
The end of it.
Yeah. So the premise of that Shattered Empire series is a bunch of little like small missions that the main characters of the original trilogy are going on with a bunch of characters that are going to tie into the new trilogy. And a couple of those characters are Poe Dameron's parents. The final chapter of Shattered Empire features Luke Skywalker going on a mission to rescue 2 trees from, I guess, the First Order. I'm not really sure. I think it's still Empire at this point. I forget. Shattered Empire. That would be it.
So this is the first time that Luke has canonically saved flora rather than fauna. And that was weird. I was like, okay, this is definitely different, but I think it's a little bit of a different kind of comic.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed it a lot. But what I'm getting to is that at the end of this rescue series, Luke gives a Force tree, I guess. And the reason it's a Force tree is because it was at the center of the Jedi Temple in Coruscant. Mm-hmm. And this was planted in the backyard of Poe Dameron. So after Poe is born, he's presumably growing up in a place with a Force tree in the background. But his parents are also crack pilots. So this kind of brings into the whole nurture versus nature, but I have a hard time kind of figuring out who's the nurture and who's the nature in this one. I guess the nature would, biologically be his genetics from his parents, who are very talented pilots. Obviously they got to where they are because they have swift reflexes, intuition, whatever, makes a great pilot. But he also has the nature of the Force, if we're assuming that it goes through all living things, that's Force is a part of nature in this universe. The nurture could also be, him being coached by his parents, as a fighter pilot, or encouraged or whatever. He's in an environment where he needs to learn how to be a pilot and, join the resistance or whatever is there at a young age. But the nurture could also be that Force tree, kind of prepping him and influencing him. So that's where my confusion comes, and that's kind of where the wrench gets thrown in for me in terms of like, okay, who can be Force sensitive and who can't be? Because canonically speaking, Shattered Empire exists, and it's part of the canon. So is Poe Dameron Force sensitive or not? And I think that's kind of a parallel to the question is Han Solo, but we have a more concrete premise to go on here that like, okay, this kid was around something that is very strong with the Force, but can that object, the tree, does it rub off on you like poison ivy, or is it like or is it just like it's just a tree, it's just a plant he keeps in his apartment, it's not having an effect in his life besides maybe boosting the oxygen levels just a slight bit.
So you think it's possible that the tree is rubbing off on Poe Dameron just due to proximity?
I don't know, it's a Force sensitive tree in his backyard.
I don't know. The Force tree is like, I like it because it has that like kind of mystical sensibility about it, and I like a little bit of that in my science fiction. But at the same time,
is it just a tree?
Yeah, is it just a tree that like, you know, is sort of a conduit? And like, I mean, you have to think like, what are the uses of this tree? Like, why does this tree have to survive for the Force to be okay? Like, why does the Force choose to inhabit this tree? Because really, at the end of it, like all I can picture, since apart from the comic, like I don't think that there are any like canonical references to something like this, but what comes to mind is that giant like neon willow tree from Avatar. You know the one that I mean?
I never saw that movie.
Gosh, this is hard. So in the movie Avatar, the blue creatures have this like ponytail thing that has basically like a little mouth on it with tentacles on the inside, and they can like hook this up to the tree. It's really weird. It's like a totally strange concept, but they can basically like either hook this up to each other, and that's how they like consummate the marriage, so to speak, or they can hook it up to a tree, and that's how they can like access their version of the Force, like their connection with all living things on their planet. So that's kind of like how I think about it, but within the context of Star Wars, they haven't really given a reason as to why these trees exist or how they can be used. So in that way, like I think it's impossible to determine whether or not the tree can actually have like, or the tree or, you know, the Force flowing within it, or however it happens to work, can have any influence on characters nearby. So it's an interesting thought, and I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of forgot about that. But, I think the story with Poe Dameron is relatively the same as Han Solo. We don't know as many stories about Poe just yet, but obviously he's also very skilled and very daring, and how much of that has to do with his own ability and how much of it has to do with the Force. I like the idea that people within the Star Wars universe can be talented without the Force, because otherwise, it doesn't really make it that interesting. If everything is just the Force, and it's just like, okay, he's special, they're special, everybody's special.
Yeah, the Force makes things a lot more boring.
Yeah,
if you think about it, it's just.
I think you need people that are just like purely talented that can, that maybe can't match up to, say, a Jedi in terms of fighting skill, but can, lend their talents in other areas to assist the Jedi or assist the Sith to keep the story interesting. Because, where would Darth Vader be without Dr. Aphra? Or where would the Rebellion be without Nien Nunb? Like, it's hard to say exactly what would happen without all these characters that aren't expressly Force sensitive or have any Force ability that help the Rebellion, help the Sith progress the storyline.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess then I gotta just believe that got a bad feeling about this is it's the new what are those, I guess.
What are those?
That's all it is.
I think so.
Maybe that's where we should just land. See some weird shoes, say what are those? Feel some bad feelings, say got a bad feeling about this.
Baby. So this is a meandering little episode here. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff to talk about here. Obviously, Rogue One is coming up soon. I thought it was just interesting to bring up Tarkin. Obviously, there's a lot of mystery behind this movie still so far. They have a trailer out, but it doesn't really reveal like too much. Like, I mean, we kind of get the idea that they're stealing the plans and that there's a daddy-daughter situation going on. Vader should probably be in this movie, but as far as other tie-ins to the standard original trilogy sort of storyline, I'm not sure exactly what else is going to happen. I don't think anybody does. So I think that Entertainment Weekly article is interesting. If you want to find that, you can find that in the show notes. Is there anything on Rogue One that you want to talk about today? This might be the last time we record on Rogue One before the movie actually comes out.
I thought it was funny what you said in your other podcast, Variable Bitrate, when your last guest was talking about Diego Luna's character as that Italian dude.
Yes, Diego Luna is Mexican, and yes, I looked that up. He's indeed Mexican, and he's very talented. I
didn't watch the second trailer that you guys were discussing, but my take on what you guys were talking about them including more Diego Luna, I think that is the difference between a trailer and a teaser. And I think the first teaser we got, that we dissected pretty heavily, that's to tantalize us with like Jyn Erso and that like the basic premise of the movie, some really great visuals, and then we need to. I mean, there's going to be other characters in the movie, and more so than just like brief, fleeting glances at like a blind ninja or whatever is going on with those other characters. Like there needs to be supporting characters in this film, and I think them featuring more Diego Luna is less of the reshoot theory and more of just like, this is actually what the movie is going to be like.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they did a great job in the original teaser just showing clips of all of the like moving parts of the film as far as like characters go. They really did show like a little bit of the entire cast at that point, with the exception being Mads Mikkelsen. They didn't show much of that, but the new trailer definitely seemed different in tone, but I think that was just to show more action and maybe a little more plot than the original one did. And I think the original one was really just supposed to set up the characters and perhaps the mood of the film. So I don't know. I hope we can record again on Rogue One before it comes out. Maybe like one more final glimpse. But if not, then hopefully we can do a little synopsis once the movie is actually out. I plan on seeing it a couple of times.
I'll try and get midnight screening tickets to it. I don't usually do that, but I'll do it. Or maybe I'll just do it actually, it sounds so much better to do it the Sunday after. Just like an 11 a.m. Sunday, just...
Mike, I'm going to see it twice by then.
That's fine. You do you, I'll do me. And check out our show notes at banthafodder.fm/episodes/13.
13.
Did I say that right?
I think so. Yeah, 13. That's it.
You can follow us at banthafodderfm on Twitter. Mine's at Mike Kamate. And Jake, you are at Jacob Tender.
Correct.
That's easy.
So yeah, that's it. So for this episode, we'll be back soon talking about more Star Wars stuff. If you have any ideas for the show or you have any feedback on the show, feel free to leave a comment on iTunes or reach out to us on Twitter. And we'll talk to you next time.
Later.
He's picked up on the fact that this is a colloquialism. Bleh. I can't say that word. C-3PO is even programmed to say it. It's within his program to say that, maybe this is like a colloquialism. How do you say that word? Colloquialism.
No, we got it. Colloquialism.
That doesn't sound right at all.
Colloquialism. There it is. Isolate that and replay it back on loop. Colloquialism. Colloquialism.
Colloquialism.
Colloquialism. Colloquialism. Colloquialism. Colloquialism.
I mean, even R2-D2's shouldn't have two whiskeys before noon.
Jesus.